Hello and welcome to another episode of the Peace Talk, where I engage with leading minds to explore new pathways of peace building in our complex world. My name is Josef Mühlbauer. I'm a peace scholar at the University of Graz, and it is my distinct privilege to welcome an exceptional guest to our new podcast and format, Dr. Fatima Sajjad. Sajjad, sorry. Dr. Fatima Sajjad is the director of the Center for Critical Peace Studies in Pakistan. She is a distinguished Pakistani peace scholar whose work is shaping critical conversation both within her region and also internationally. She's a researcher in the field of critical peace studies, as I mentioned, and also peace education in Pakistan. Her fields of research contains contemporary education, in and outside Pakistan, ideas for building peace through education, and last but not least, within this framework of education, she argues for empowering voices of the global south and for decolonial thinking in global studies and political sociology. She is furthermore a founding director of the Pluricity Lahore, which we will come back a little bit later, and Professor Sajjad will explain us about this project. So, Professor Sajjad, thank you very much that you followed my invitation for this Peace Talk.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
As the director of this mentioned Center for Critical Peace Studies, what is the core mission of this center and how does it fundamentally differ from traditional peace studies or international relations institutes? So what is the, so to speak, the critical part of critical peace studies?
Okay, thank you so much. So generally, I shall try to explain a few things about the social sciences and the domain of international relations and the peace studies. So international relations, again, first of all, we need to understand that all the ideas and theories and or the different perspectives that we have, including the different disciplines that we have, they are born in a certain historical context. So the theories that we engage with, the ideas that we engage with, and the disciplines that were born and constructed, they were all born in a certain context. So the social sciences are also born in the context of 19th century when half of the world was colonized. And this was born in Europe. And a lot of what social sciences is about is remains connected to the colonial project of the Western powers. So we need to understand social sciences and some of the disciplines, including international relations in that context. And international relations about this subject, we already say that it is very US centric and or Eurocentric, which means that Europe or US remains at the center of this subject, and they view the world from the perspective of United States or from the perspectives of big powers or the European powers. Historically, it is again born in the universities of the global north. So that is one of the problems with international relations. Peace studies, when it was born as a critical perspective within the international relations. Because peace studies was born by Johann Galtung when he started in 1959. He started peace studies. He founded an institute and a journal, which started a debate from where we have the subject of peace studies. So when it was born as an alternative to the mainstream IR or the dominant IR, because we need to understand again the context of 1960s. And Ole Weaver points out that in 1960s, the subject of security and the subject of peace, there was a divergence between them. So security studies was generally the big powers or the governments or the people in power. They were talking about national security in context of the Cold War. But in the same 1960s, we see the civil rights movements. We see the anti-Vietnam War protests, which were happening in the streets. There were environmental movements happening in the streets. So peace studies is born out of these movements, especially the anti-Vietnam War movement and anti-nuclear weapons movement as well, and civil rights movements. All of these joined hands, and this was the context of the resistance on streets, which gave birth to the peace studies as conceptualized by Galtung, because Galtung defined violence very broadly. Now, the Galtung's definition of violence is at the center of peace studies. It is the foundation of peace studies. And he describes violence as anything that stops a human being from achieving his or her full potential as a human being. So anything that hinders a human being from achieving his or her full potential is violence, according to Galtung. And he gives a central importance to the idea of structural violence. And when we start questioning the structural violence, which is the normal of our life, this is definitely a very, very critical take on the normal way of doing things. So peace studies originally, as conceptualized by Galtung, was a critical alternative space within international relations. But despite giving this central importance to the structural violence as peace studies we see as it was developed in the North, there is one particular part of structural violence which it largely overlooks, which is epistemic violence. And epistemic violence is again silencing of the people. And again, we see that peace studies, just as IR, is very much North-centric. Most of the voices that who are speaking for peace are the voices of the global North, or we have the American or the European speaking for peace. So we are critical because we raise the question, who speaks for peace and why? And why the global South, which is 80% of the world's population, why are they silenced or marginalized or discredited in peace studies? And we point out that peace studies, because it gives so much importance to structural violence, it's very important for peace studies at least to be mindful of the epistemic violence that we find within this domain. So we try to undo this epistemic violence by amplifying the voices of the Global South scholars. That is the mission of the Critical Peace Studies Center. And that is what we strive to do. And I think especially today in 2025, it's very important to understand this, because structural violence, we do see that the dominant sources of knowledge, I think that the credibility of them, I'm going to talk about Gaza, I'm going to talk about Palestine as well, and how that has really discredited a lot of dominant knowledge of IR and peace studies. And I'm going to talk about when I'm explaining the concept of epistemic violence further.
Thank you very much for your insights. And to the audience, feel free to ask any questions and send us comments, and feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, I would like also to move the attention to the great second international conference on critical peace studies that you held, that the Center for Critical Peace Studies provided. It was a great platform and scholarly engagement, and I attended it. I also wrote some sort of report. I was very, delighted, and yeah, I learned a lot. And there, for example, maybe you can also touch on the conference, and you can make a sum up what happened there. What I took from this conference was, for example, Professor Richard Jackson delivered a powerful, remark. Also, he was invoking Walter Mignolo's concept of epistemic disobedience, and I got goosebumps when he talked about, all the contemporary, concepts and philosophy, and he argued also about Gaza and the ongoing conflict. So yeah, and the whole conference was great. So maybe can you touch upon the idea behind this conference, and also maybe we can elaborate deeper. We dig deeper into the concept from Walter Mignolo's epistemic disobedience. So these two would interest me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for attending the conference, for being there, and for writing the report. Thank you for amplifying the voices, because we do need such support when we are doing this kind of work. So one of the things, one driving force for doing this conference was we were standing for the voices of the global south, but especially since 2023, I think our work has become extremely important. And the purpose of doing this conference was that I think a lot of how we understood international relations and peace studies has changed in the past 2 years. So we had the first conference of critical peace studies in 2023, before the recent violence in Gaza started. And I think within the past 2 years, a lot has changed. So I think one thing we must realize is that we right now we have to be mindful and very conscious of the present moment. And I think the present moment, what we are witnessing is nothing short of a Holocaust. So we are living in times of a Holocaust, and we are watching it live on our cell phones, on our videos. Everything is very well documented and reported, and we watch it every day. The starving children, and again, the images that we could not imagine we are going to witness in our lifetime. So we see all of this, but the mainstream knowledge domains, they try to unsee a lot of that. And unseeing is also something we want to make difficult for the dominant uh, peace studies and dominant knowledge domains. They have to see it as a very great human tragedy which is happening in a lifetime. So one of the purpose of doing this conference was, again, starting a discourse and challenging the mainstream, and having a sense of the present moment, that how we can move from this point onwards and build a discourse of peace studies and international relations which is connected to the present times, which realizes the importance of the present moment. And I think what we are witnessing is a dismantling of the order which was in place since the end of the Second World War. So, and a lot of what the liberal world order was all about, we have serious questions on that. So, one of the purpose of doing that was this conference was um, making people conscious of the present moment. And I'm glad that Professor Richard Jackson and Professor Torres, all of those scholars who are already engaged in this kind of discourse, and they came and they kind of supported the argument that we are trying to make.
Absolutely, yes, I enjoyed it, and it was for many hours, and also many other scholars participated from around the world, from Europe, from Latin America, and it was a huge conference, and also it was hybrid, so most of the people were also participating at the university directly in Pakistan, but also many of them were participating online. So yeah, it was a huge hybrid conference, very well organized, and yeah. So let's move on directly to the next questions, which is also some sort of we touched on upon this conference, but besides the conference, you also are committed to decolonializing peace studies, also concrete research projects, educational programs, community engagement. So maybe we can touch upon all the other stuff that you are dealing with.
Okay, thank you. So one of the challenge which remains is that how, and I appreciate the question that you're doing, that how whatever we are doing in the theoretical domain, how we are materializing that in practice, and how we are developing our specific projects. So one of the things is that we have built, there are two strategies that we do for decolonizing peace, because you asked about the specific way we go about things, is that there are two basic goals. One is that we question the dominant narratives and we challenge them. And the second is that we build alternative spaces where we can do things differently. So both go hand in hand. And with this, we've built two different forums as well. One is the Center for Critical Peace Studies, which is a university-based research forum. And we are working within the walls of university. When we are talking about decolonizing peace, we need to understand that university remains a part of the colonial project, because when the colonizers, they were trying to control the domain of knowledge, they did that through universities, through schools, through an education system, which is the normal of our life today. But this education system and universities, they were built in times to control the space of knowledge, and again dominate. And that is still the case, that the dominant knowledge that we study in Pakistan, in other parts of the global south, that is the knowledge of the West. We get the degrees in international relations, and when they are verified from the Western scholars, so we get again evaluated by the Western scholars. If they give us they think that our work is valuable, then our local scholars, they are considered that the work is valuable. So it's so university remains an institution which is related to, and it is to the contemporary university in Pakistan as well, in other parts of the global south as well, are what we call the westernized universities. So one forum we have built, which is an alternative forum where we have more space than the usual departments to question things, but we still work within the system. So that is one strategy, to use the system or hack the system to challenge the system. And so when we are decolonizing, it's a very complex process, because we realize that we are part and a product of the system we are challenging. That is a realization we must work with. I realize that I am a product of a system which is born out of coloniality. So we do discuss that a lot of coloniality is in our blood and bones. That's how we live. And so we question all of that. We try to identify all of that, but with the realization that we are working within a system which is colonial. So that is one way of doing things. The other is moving out of the walls of universities and building forums and networks and communities, which are an alternative spaces where we have more space to work freely without the constraints of the university. So we have started this other forum. We have said there are some like-minded scholars, and it is a locally rooted, globally connected forum, which we call the Pluriversity Lahore. And we have a channel where we continue to have these debates, and we continue to have different courses as well, where we engage the local people as well. Again, the dominant knowledge of peace studies in Pakistan is very much security centric and US centric, but we try to challenge that, and we have managed to again create ripples which are going to create change. So there are these two forums and two different ways of challenging the system that we are trying to do.
So, in other words, you also try to diversify knowledge production and reproduction of non-Western, or how can I put it, decolonial thought and
Yes, and it's not something very simple. It's not something that we can find something very pure decolonial, because we continue to play with the systems which are there. So one of the things we are doing right now is introducing a new video journal, which is the Journal of Critical Peace Studies, and we are introducing live peer reviews. So academic journals are generally based on peer review process, which is generally opaque. We do not know who is the other, who is the reviewer, and a lot of times we cannot be in conversation with our reviewer. So we are trying to undo that, and the process of publication takes a lot of time. So we are challenging this publication industry as well, which is dominated by the West, and we are creating an alternative space on with Pluriversity Forum, which is again a hybrid forum and a journal, which is a video journal. And in this journal, we have excellent reviewers who are going to sit with the authors. The authors present their ideas, present their work, and we are going to have live peer reviews, because we realize that in the times of genocide, we don't have the time that we submit, we get the article submitted and it gets published after 8 to 9 months. So we want live peer reviews, a live conversation, which is broadcasted to the people, and people get involved in that conversation as well. So we want to have a real-time impact of the knowledge that we are creating, instead of doing knowledge as a product, as a final product. We are presenting it as a process, as an ongoing process. So people present their ideas, and we have the peer reviews right there as a conversation. More people get involved. It's more democratic. It's very transparent, and it is a way of having a real-time impact of the knowledge that we are creating. So we are working on that journal, and again, we are working with very limited means. We are looking for partners, looking for collaborators who can help us with generate resources for this. But even with the limited resources, I hope we will be able to make an impact. So we are working in that direction.
Sounds very good, and hope you are succeeding in doing so. Let me go back to the first thing that you mentioned. You mentioned Johann Galtung. He coined and he was a key figure in critical peace studies. He coined not only the concepts of cultural violence, but also structural violence. So the more hidden forms of the obvious physical violence, which is of course war. And also there is a famous quote, peace is much more than the absence of war. And so we need to look behind the curtains. We need to look at, some deeper structures. And this is a very fascinating field. So let's dig deeper a little bit into these decolonial theories. I'm wondering, for example, because it's also very complex, and it's very, complicated in the sense that there are many terms. I believe Spivak and other coined this term epistemic violence. Then Boaventura de Sousa Santos coined the epistemologies of the South, of the global South. Then there is also a term epistemic genocide. Then Walter Meliolo, as we mentioned in this interview before, coined epistemic disobedience. So there are a lot of concepts, and this whole set of theories is so huge. And can we dig deeper into these theories so that our audience understand what we are talking about?
Okay, so one of the things the decolonial discourse it does is that it makes you conscious of the location of your knowledge. So knowledge is always created in a certain mind, which is born in a certain context, and it is located in a certain place. So I think for you, maybe located in the global north, you find these maybe some of these concepts complex. But for me, it's a part of my lived experience from the day I was born, because I do not find my voice in international relations. I study the US authors, the American authors, and again, all the work that you engage with in our universities is American. So where is my voice in that? And that has always been a question with me. So it's a part of my lived experience. So when McNullo talks about, he talks about a colonial wound, which is common in the global South, because the global South is created through this process of colonization. So I can sense what McNullo is saying when it talks about a wound which is common in the global South and all the colonized and racialized people. So we do understand it because this is the only IR or peace studies that make sense to me, because that is the part of my lived experience. And I find my voice in this, in the idea of epistemic disobedience, which means it doesn't make sense to me what an Enlightenment scholar, maybe I can get some insights from an Enlightenment scholar like maybe Kant or Rousseau or some, but a lot of that I cannot relate to. But so where are the voices? How because a lot of my knowledge will be connected to my experience in my land. So I have to disobey, and I have to talk about my voice, and where is that? And the other ideas you talk about, for example, epistemic violence, it's again marginalizing, silencing. And remember, when I say global South, it means 80% of the world. That's a huge majority. So a better word is the global majority. So the voices of the global majority, we call international relations international, but generally the international we talk about is US or Europe or maybe Australia or now China. But we don't have the voices of Africans or Latin Americans or a lot of Asians. We do have voices, but the central voice is always the European or the American. So we are critical because we try to center Africa, we try to center Latin America, not just include them, but center them and see the world through our perspective, through our lens. And a lot of scholars, decolonial scholars, they talk about this double sight that we have as a subaltern. And the subaltern gaze, we understand the world from your perspective as well, because we have engaged that knowledge, and we understand the world at our level as well. So we are always have that double sight, and that gives you an edge, because to understand things and how they're working, and to understand some of the complexity that goes with all these terms that you talked about. To me, they look pretty simple because they've always been a part of my life. So you name it, I'll explain it from my experience. But but it is always a knowledge to me when I find that some of the scholars in the Europe, they find it difficult to understand because maybe that has not been a part of what you have experienced in your lifetime. So one of the important things in decolonizing discourses is talking about the location of the knowledge, the context of the knowledge, and again, giving credit to the local knowledge system, the indigenous knowledge system, which have a lot of wisdom, which is again a different worldview. And there's so much that we can learn from the Africans, from their indigenous cultures. For example, the idea of Ubuntu, it is presented as the idea against the Descartes idea of I think, therefore I am. And Ubuntu say, I am because you are, because my existence is connected to you. So when the dominant knowledge of I are, they talk about, which is realism, they talk about that human selfishness, the idea of Ubuntu and a lot of other indigenous ideas, they undo those ideas because they say that we are inseparable from each other. We cannot be separated from each other. So if we are inseparable, we are connected to each other in an ecosystem, which is our land. How can, if I harm you, that's going to harm me as well. So we are all interconnected, and we cannot be separated. So these indigenous ideas they can really be replaced because they give us a different worldview. So why do I care about, I'm a Pakistani, why do I care so much about what is happening in Gaza? Because that I remain connected to that. We are all connected. So it's not that it's not going to have an impact on me. That's impossible. So this denial of our inseparability is what we find in a lot of Eurocentric discourses. And we find a lot of wisdom and a lot of connectivity with the land, connectivity with each other. Again, our relations with each other in the indigenous discourses. So we need to pay more attention to these indigenous cultures, which have been discredited by the Western scholars and the colonizers. And Bruce Fogel used the terms epistemicide. So genocide and epistemicide, which is again discrediting and silencing the local knowledges, the local knowledge systems. Again, he calls it the epistemicide. And that has always been a part of the colonial project, along with the genocides that happened.
Thank you for your deep analysis and insights. You mentioned now the Gaza conflict or Gaza genocide, and I'm wondering because we especially from Austria and Germany, we have a different world view compared to other nations and also compared to many of the global South. So I'm wondering, how do you look at us from in the West and also especially in Germany and Austria? Because we were talking for decades about the value-based or rules-based order, which is based on international law and humanitarian law. And now we are witnessing such a crime against humanity, and many even legal scholars or Holocaust scholars, like I had previously on the program, the famous Professor Omar Bartov, who openly stated that this is a genocide that we're witnessing. So I'm wondering how you scholars from the global south look at this liberal values and Western values, like I mentioned, the rules-based order. What do you think about? Is Gaza a turning point, a tipping point, or yeah? What do you think?
Okay, so I think Gaza is only making the contradictions very obvious and very visible. They were always there within the liberal order that we call it. And the problem with liberalism is, and again, this is what I argue in my book as well, that a lot of peace studies and a lot of what we call international relations, that liberalism stands for peace and liberalism is talking about peace. But the problem with Western liberalism is that when they talk about human rights or human dignity or human life, the human they're talking about is generally the white male. And this is true for Enlightenment scholars as well. They were seldom talking about the people they colonized. They were seldom talking about the Black or racialized people. They were seldom talking about the women. And so this is the contradiction of liberalism, because they think that only this certain class is human, and all of the rest are less human. So this is what I question in my book as well, that let me be fully human. I'm also as fully human as anybody is. So that is something we always have to ask for, and ask from the people who are not really willing to listen. Gaza has always made that truth about the modern colonial world and the decolonizing discourses that talk about the modern world as a modern colonial world, because this dark side, this coloniality, has always been a part of the modern world. So up till now, maybe they've used different tactics. Again, the dominant knowledge. They've been again trying to make things vague when when to they've been kind of successful in hiding these contradictions of the Western liberalism, and we see it within the United Nations as well. It talks about all states being equal, and then it gives the 5 states the veto power. Both cannot be true at the same time. Either all of us are equal. So if we accept the liberal ideas, and if we accept all human beings as human beings, really all human beings, not just few human beings, that is a revolutionary idea. That is the radical idea we talk about. But the problem is that it's always been exclusive. So the humans have always been few people, and the rest have always been less than human. And so I give credit to the Palestinian journalists, the people in Palestine, because for the past 2 years, they've really very successfully, they have not let the dominant narrative to prevail, because they've used their cameras while they were facing death. They've used their cameras when they were facing the bombings and genocide. They've been consistently reporting live in very, very dangerous conditions. That is again a very brave act, but they've documented all the details, and they did not allow the dominant narrative to prevail. So I think one of the things this has done, because they've challenged the epistemic violence, they've undone the prevailing epistemic violence. One of the things they've done is, in the past 2 years, one of the things I see is that people no longer trust the dominant sources of information. For example, BBC or CNN or New York Times. All of them have been challenged. They've been, I think, totally discredited, especially among the young people who can see all these things very clearly. So all these old tools of information and information control, they have been discredited by the global majority now in the past 2 years. So this is how undoing epistemic violence, this is how things turn. So that is why I think Gaza is very central to doing peace studies today and in the future. I think the people of Gaza, they are the ones who should be setting the agenda for the future of peace studies. I don't think US has the right to do that. I don't think all the Western powers who've been complicit in this genocide, they have any right to talk about human rights or human liberation. So instead of the liberal peace order, we talk about the liberatory peace order, the liberatory peace. And liberation is a different concept. And liberation is liberation from all the man-made oppressive structures which are there. And this is in line with the original peace studies as envisioned by Galtung, which is undoing the structural violence which is there.
Absolutely. Thank you for your insights and thoughts. Just to mention that once again, I want to encourage our audience to comment and ask question in the YouTube section below. And also, I wanted to clarify that the thinkers of the Enlightenment contain thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Thomas Hobbes, Immanuel Kant, David Hume, Denis Diderot, and also for me, I wrote also on John Locke, and for me it was John Locke. It is the, how can I say, the epicenter of Western double standards, because he held some contradictory views on slavery, for example, because theoretically he argued in the two treaties of government against slavery, and he talked about the natural rights of a human being and so on and so forth. But in the praxis, he invested in colonial enterprises and so on and so forth of the Royal Dutch Company, I believe it was. So I believe this is some sort of a funny history. So I wanted to add this story. Yes.
Yeah. So this contradiction between theory and practice, that has always been a part of the liberal world order and liberalism. And I think a lot of problems would be solved if we just practice what we preach and practice the theory. So if we actually believe that all human beings are equal, there will be no problem. But that has not been the case. And we see the structure of the world which is divided and very unequal.
Absolutely, yes. Unfortunately, it is true. We are not equal. So let's move on to the next question. You published in 2023, 2 years ago, and you edited and you published a book called Peace as Liberation, Visions and Praxis from Below. And I ask you to give us the key takeaways from this book. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the ideas was again amplifying the voices of the global South, and the racialized scholars as well. So this was an edited volume, and I was lucky to have chapters from all across the world, from all the different continents. We had from Africa and from America, the racialized scholars, they've contributed chapters as well. I had one which was about Palestine as well, and it's a beautiful chapter, and it talks about how just merely existing joyfully is an act of resistance for the Palestinians. And this was before October 7, 2023. This book was published just a few days before October 7. So the basic, again, idea or the takeaway was, again, we questioned the epistemic violence in the ranks of peace psychology and peace studies. And we questioned psychology, the dominant psychology as well, and its idea of human, and how that human, again, is it talks about a certain type of human being, and the racialized people, they've never been a part of that. So we talk about finance ideas, we talk about voices, again, Martin Luther King's ideas as well, and their psychology, I think, is what we really need to study and engage with in order to understand how the dominant knowledge works. So we question this epistemic violence within peace psychology and peace studies, and again we talked about, again, how to undo this epistemic violence, and we collected all these voices which tell a totally different story, which is embedded in the lived experiences of the people. So instead of taking psychology as a science, or peace studies as a science, and science as a certain way of doing science has always been a part of colonial project as well, when human beings are taken as debtor. So human beings are treated as just data for a certain study. And there is a difference of position about who is researching and who is being researched. So researcher has a different scientific objective cap that it is wearing, and the lived experience or the suffering of the other, that becomes the data for the researcher. So there is violence in this kind of science, which has always been a part of the colonial project. So we challenged all of these things, and we presented a vision of peace psychology and peace studies, which is embedded in the lived experience of the people of the global south and the racialized scholars and the marginalized people as well. So that was what we tried to do through this work. So that is why we titled it Peace as Liberation. Because generally when we talk about peace, a lot of peace discourse is used to silence the resistance as well. When the people who are resisting, they resist, and there is violence that comes with that. So the people in power, they start advocating peace. No, we don't want violence. Let's have peace. So peace, a lot of time, has been used as a tool of power to silence resistance. So we wanted to present this other vision where liberation is our idea of having peace, liberation with justice.
Absolutely. I heard, I believe, from a thinker from former Yugoslavia. I forgot his name, unfortunately, but he coined the term cruel peace. So he also said that being neutral, or is also some sort of violence, because you can, in some cases, you cannot be neutral. You need to act, and you need to have some sort of or some form of resistance. So I heard this concept before, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
On that side,
if you allow me, let me tell you about
sure.
Galtung as well, his original article, which is again a very seminal article in peace studies. He also talks about this scenario because he makes a distinction between direct violence and structural violence. And a lot of times he says, and that is what people like Fanon also say, that a lot of times when you're questioning and challenging the structural violence, it comes with direct violence. So direct violence is the general sense of violence. So a lot of times it's important to stand against injustice, even if that brings in violence. But that is and he makes a distinction between positive peace and negative peace as well. So positive peace is the conditions of peace where we undo the structural violence and cultural violence. And negative peace is when you only have the absence of war or absence of direct violence. So absence of structural violence is actually the purpose of doing peace studies. And that can come with a lot of time with resistance and violence. So that is what Galtung talks about as well.
Thank you for your detailed answer. Maybe let's see what I got. My last question, and then I also want, we have several questions in the chat box. I want to direct it to you as well. But before we move on to the question from the chat and from the audience, I have a question also related to the concept of liberation and also to resistance. Because in the German-speaking field of peace studies and also in the field of critical peace studies, I joined a lot of conferences, I traveled a lot, I spoke with several not only in this interview format, but also privately with different peace scholars. And I have the feeling that we have some sort of ambivalent position to violence and to armed resistance. And for example, I would maybe call myself a pacifist. So not every form of resistance is legit, in my opinion. And that maybe leads also to my next question. And I think in Europe there is some sort of consensus on this part, but maybe other parts of the world who are oppressed have a different view. So who am I to judge them? So don't misunderstand me. But maybe this is also my last question that refers, maybe we can refer this to, how can education, for example, help overcome extremism and violence? And also, how can, maybe this is a question for the global north or west, or however you want to call it, how can we overcome or unlearn coloniality? How can we overcome our imperial mode of living? So maybe, yeah, there are a lot to unpack. Hope we get it.
Thank you. Thank you. I do get it. I wouldn't say, I'll be cautious to say that a lot of armed resistance, maybe a lot of them are not very justified. I'm not here to justify all the movements which tend to be violent. I do disagree, because in Pakistan, we've had a lot of, before 9/11, after 9/11, we've had a lot of experience with violent extremism, which has not been pleasant at all. And we've been at the receiving end of that. So I'm not going to justify all actions which are done in the name of resistance. But having said this, a lot of resistance which is happening is just a symptom of a bigger problem of oppression which is there. So we cannot deal with that resistance without questioning those bigger structures which are feeding those resistance. So so education can be helpful. I think. Because I believe in these words from the preamble of UNESCO Constitution, that that the war begins in the minds of men, and it is in the minds of men the defenses of peace must be constructed. So education is about shaping mindsets, and extremism is also, it relates to the mindsets of the people. So education can definitely undo violence and extremism, because it can shape the mindsets of the people. Now, how we shape that, one of the things we did one of the things we try to do through our education projects that we do at the Pluriversity and Center for Critical Peace Studies, we try to focus on 3 key skills. One is what a lot of policy discourses and they talk about, which is social cohesion, which is respect for difference, because you have to respect a different point of view. You don't have to agree with that, but you must give it respect. So that is one key skill. But this is where a lot of policy discourse, they've emphasized it a lot, because it is very much important. But this is for peace, we have to go beyond that as well. It does not question the status quo which is there. So the second and third skill is, I think, very crucial to undo extremism, which we try to build through education, which is one is critical consciousness. And critical consciousness, as envisioned by Paulo Freire and other people, is when you're aware of the injustice around you, and you read and reflect and act. So action and reflection, which are they are in alignment with each other. So we try to inculcate this critical consciousness, which comes with awareness, which comes with the reflection, which comes with a connection with your personal life experience as well. And you're constantly reflecting and acting to actually change the conditions which are oppressive, is also a part of this education. So it's not just building resilience, it's actually changing the conditions which we demand us to build resilience against. So changing the conditions and undoing the oppression as well is part of the educational projects that we do. So one skill is building social cohesion through education. Second is critical consciousness. And the third is, again, very important to undo extremism, especially, which is reflexivity. So we try to develop and inculcate reflexivity through our educational projects, which is reflexivity is questioning your own assumptions and how your worldview, what are your deeper assumptions. So while we're doing the critique of others, we do the introspection as well. We look inside as well. We do the critique of our own assumptions as well. So when we develop this skill of constantly doing the critique of outside as well as inside, and this can be developed through education and research courses, we can have, again, undo a lot of extremism which is there, because we are questioning our assumptions, we are questioning ourselves constantly, We are connecting it to the larger picture, to our worldview, to what is happening around us with the consciousness of everything which is happening. So this is again a multiple level consciousness which we try to develop through education. So I think it's very helpful, and we've seen a lot of people changing their mindsets in Pakistan through education of this kind, which promotes critical consciousness and reflexivity. So I think that's a very helpful kind of educational intervention that we can do.
Absolutely. Thank you for your thoughts. Maybe now I can pay the attention to the questions from the chat. So we have a wonderful question, and I also want to read it. Thank you for your powerful words. I have two questions. First, how do you see the future of women in academic world in Pakistan? So let's start from here.
Okay, so that's something we try to continuously talk about. I think the women in Pakistan, especially in the urban areas, also in the rural areas, I think I see a transformation. I see the young generation, because there was my generation. I see a lot of things changing within one generation. So what we call Gen Z, I see a lot of women empowerment there. And I remain very hopeful. I think, especially in education, now, if you see the statistics in Pakistan, a lot of top position holders in educational institutions in Pakistan, this is on record for many years now, they're generally females. And same is true in the institution where I work. A lot of top positions, and the females are running them. So I remain very hopeful, and I remain in touch with the women in Pakistan who are speaking their mind, who are making a change. So I do realize that there are a lot of problems in Pakistani society in terms of women, but I think I do remain positive because I see a lot of change as well. So I remain hopeful for the future.
Thank you for your answer. And I also see other questions. The question, I hope I understood it correctly. It's about the mass abuse of Europeans and gang rape, and is this systemic violence? I believe that the user is referring to patriarchal violence in countries such as India, that we hear a lot of in Western newspapers, also Pakistan. Yes, also in Pakistan. So is this also, can we call it systemic violence, cultural violence, or what form of violence is it? I hope I understood the question correct. And what are the maybe reasons behind it? Because you have this narrative also in the West that we are, how can I put it, in this regard, not so much patriarchal. Of course, that's narrative, but maybe we can unpack it.
Yeah, but I am going to acknowledge that there is a lot of problems in Pakistan in terms of patriarchy. We do have a systemic violence, and we do have patriarchal systems. We do have microaggressions, which in the workplaces as well. And we do have a lot of violence against not only women, also children, also all the people who are the weaker section of the society. So, but the good thing about Pakistan is that people are questioning a lot of that. There are very, very bad things happening, very, very shocking things happening. But because of that shock, there is a debate as well. And I do see a lot of voices who are raising voices against them. So there is a greater consciousness among the people and the young generation to undo all these structures. So I see a lot of promise, and I see a change in the young generation, because they question a lot of things which we were not conscious of in our times. When I was in college or universities, we were not conscious of a lot of things because they remain hidden. But now things, because of the social media, they are highlighted, they're questioned, they're challenged, there's a discourse which is changing a lot of things. So when you start identifying a problem, when you start seeing a problem and start talking about it, a lot of problems they start getting resolved. So because people are more conscious of these patriarchal systems, they were not so conscious of these things, let's say 2 decades ago, but now they're talking about all these things. So we do see that people feel the need to change, and that is changing a lot of things. But there's still that a lot that needs to happen. So, but I think I remain hopeful that a good change will come.
And if we try to dig deeper, for example, the nature of this kind of mass violence, it is not an individual actor, but it's constantly happening. So we need to understand this process. So maybe also there are economic factors. For example, the extreme inequality, inflation, youth unemployment. Maybe these are also factors which led to structural violence and also to this mentioned abuses. Maybe also some sort of how can I say, social hierarchies. It depends on which community we are talking on and which colonial baggage there is. And so there are many layers to understand
Yes,
this
there are many
phenomenon.
layers. But the problem is, even among the affluent classes, even among the people who are well off, even in the urban areas, there are problems. And I would, when we talk about culture, but a lot of the culture is shaped by the capitalist system, which is in place as well, which is exploitative towards women as well. So that adds another layer to these cultural problems and pressures and all of that. So again, all of the incidents, they have a context, and we have to understand that context. And a lot of things are really disturbing, but the good thing is that we do have forums which are talking about these things very boldly, and that is a reason to be hopeful for the future.
Thank you for your insights, and I have no further questions. Feel free to say something if I missed it, or if you want to add something about future projects, or the university or the field of critical peace studies where people can join, maybe the website or something else, some book that I did not mention, or now it's the time.
Okay, so basically, yes. No, you talked about the book as well, which is important. And again, I think if there are any questions or anyone who wants to ask anything, I can leave my email with you. I try to give response on my email as well. I can maybe write it here in the comment in the chat box.
The easiest part is I can add it on the YouTube channel so people can see the website, and then they go to the Center for Critical Peace Studies and there is your email. That is no problem.
So,
Maybe I have a question related to geopolitics. I'm not sure if you want to comment on that, because it's so recently and Western media is talking a lot about it. Pakistani foreign minister, if I'm not mistaken, it was the foreign minister, visits Bangladesh for the first time, I believe, in a decade or more than a decade. So, and many people interpret this as a geopolitical shift, or the grand chessboard is changing, because there were some of violence between Pakistan and Bangladesh in the past, and also because Bangladesh, if I'm not mistaken, is a geopolitical ally with India, and all we know, India and Pakistan have some difficult relations. So how do you interpret this visit by your foreign minister? And maybe you are able to answer it. Feel free to answer it, to comment it. If not, it's no problem. It's just
I think
a top question.
what we see is what we see in Bangladesh. We've seen a recent change in Bangladesh as well. So the current government, they are actually undoing a lot of violence which was in place in Bangladesh for a long time. So and I think it is time for Pakistan and Bangladesh to be very close. But there have been, on people to people level, I think there have been very really close. and brotherly. We do have cricket is very popular in Pakistan, so we do have regular visits of these countries through the cricket as well. So I don't see it as a big geopolitical shift, but I think it's important to build good relations with all the neighbors, including India. Although we do have tensions, but I think there's nothing that we have to gain from there. But there has to be a realization on both sides. And right now, the current government in India, that is, it does have problems. So that we can talk about maybe some other time. But I think it's a good move, and I think, but I don't see a big geopolitical shift if that was what the question was about.
And maybe a leading up question, can you feel or do you see in your perspective and from your critical peace studies perspective and lens, do you see the BRICS as maybe more just, or how can I put it, maybe an alternative to the Western-led hegemony? And is it for good? Is it for bad? And where is Pakistan's place in BRICS, in this new upcoming, China, Brazil, Russia, geopolitical shift?
I think that's one confusion that we have to clarify, because in the IR domain, a lot of people who engage with the mainstream IR, they talk about the rise of China as something which is maybe related to the decolonial. Maybe it's going to lead to the rise of Asia or other things, but we need to understand that the decolonial discourse stands for something else. It is an alternative to the Western capitalist model. So what if the rise of China or the rise of BRICS or the rise of India, what they're doing is that they're trying to claim their space in a system which was created by the West, which is the Western capitalist colonial system. So if they try to create their space or take their space or claim their space in the system which was created by the West, that's not an alternative. That's just the one taking the other. Maybe China taking the US, or that's not the change of the system. We talk about a different system, which is built on different ideas, different economic system, and based more on our relation with each other, our connectivity with each other, rather than using these all of these things for our benefit and for our own selfish interests. So that remains at the base of the way this Western modern world, it talks about the land as something they're going to use. It talks about the people as something, or the states or the alliances as something that they are going to use for their own benefit, for their own selfish interest. That is something we want to challenge, and we want to talk about our mutual connectivity and also our connectivity and inseparability with the land. And we see the climate crisis where it's heading. That is another major crisis we are facing in Pakistan right now. And even the climate emergency, that also calls for a different alternative, which is different from the Western capitalism which is in place. So this is the alternative we talk about, not just one just taking the other. So we need to change the terms and the ideas and the way we live on this earth, and that is the alternatives we want to build.
Thank you for this clarification. That's a wonderful answer. And also it's in alignment with also from the second conference that we mentioned earlier, the Center for Critical Peace Studies that organized this conference that we spoke of. Also, Professor, I hope I don't butcher the name, Huma Bakai, provided a very deep analysis of the contemporary shifting geopolitical alliances and realignments and so on. And she criticized also in the same manner the term multipolar, because she argued that this evokes, this dangerous rivalry and bloc politics like we had it in the Cold War. And, she referred, by the way, to the First World War. And Bakai advocate for a different concept called multiplexity, and this I learned from her. So she defined a global system characterized by multi-dimensionality, complex interaction, and also the absence of hegemony. So not that's what you said basically now. Not one fighting for hegemony
That is the
and
idea of the pluriversity as well. That is a pluriversal vision, not universal, because universal is how the Western knowledge system and the institution of university, they've been branding the Western knowledge or the knowledge produced from their location as universal. So we are trying to give credit to all the different knowledge systems and again learning from each other. So that's a pluriversal space that we are trying to build, accepting different forms of knowledge and giving credit to different people who are working in their location. So that is a different vision, and being connected to each other, learn from each other, and try to create a better world through our connectivity.
that are wonderful visions and words. So let's leave it here. I thank you very much for your time, dear Professor Fatima Sajjad, and it was a great honor and privilege to have you on the program. I enjoyed your books and also your presence at the conference, and hope you are doing well with your future projects, and hope we see each other again.
Thank you so much for having me.